Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and honestly shatter a pretty massive modern misconception we all seem to share. We have this really strong tendency to look back at ancient humans and just picture them as these mindless survival machines, right? We imagine them constantly running from predators or desperately foraging for berries in the dirt from dawn until absolute dusk, with zero free time to just breathe. But what if I told you that our early ancestors actually had vastly more free time than you do right now? Today, we're exploring the visual history of human evolution, and we're not doing this through the typical textbook lens of pure survival. We're looking at the incredible, breathtaking artifacts created in the quiet, empty spaces of prehistoric life. Think about it for a second. Right now, you've probably got a dozen apps on your phone, endless streaming services, video games, just this constant, vibrating barrage of notifications demanding your attention. And yet somehow, despite all of that, you still get bored. Now, I want you to imagine sitting by a Paleolithic campfire, maybe 100,000 years ago. There are no screens, no books, there isn't even a written language yet. It's just you, the warmth of the fire, the vast night sky, and absolutely nothing to do. So what did they do? The answer to what our ancestors did in those profoundly quiet moments literally changes everything we think we know about creativity, society, and how our brains actually work. Now, you might be thinking, come on, they didn't have time to be bored. Well, look at this number, 15 to 20. That is the genuinely shocking number of hours early hunter-gatherers, like the Kung people of the Kalahari Desert, actually worked per week. Not per day, per week. Anthropologist Marshall Salins figured this out back in the 1960s, and it completely reset our academic expectations of ancient life. He actually famously called them the original affluent society. Why? Because they possessed the one single resource that most modern humans are desperately starved for. Time. They had time to think, time to rest, and time to just be. So, here's the really crucial point. Think about how our modern burnout contrasts so sharply with that ancient, quiet world. Modern psychology tells us that when every single moment of our day is stimulated, when we're constantly scrolling, clicking, refreshing, we suffer from severe cognitive overload. But in that ancient, quiet world, the deep silence allowed something called the brain's default mode network to totally thrive. This is the part of your brain responsible for creativity, self-reflection, and empathy. It's actually that exact same part of your brain that suddenly gives you a brilliant idea when you're just standing idly in the shower. It only really activates and does its absolute best work when you are doing nothing. To see exactly how this immense amount of free time shaped us, let's actually map this out. Looking at this timeline, we're going to examine 4 physical markers: 75,000-year-old shell beads, a 46,000-year-old skeleton, a 40,000-year-old bone flute, and a 27,000-year-old shaman burial. Each one tells a profound story of what happens when the human mind is left to its own devices across these vast scales of time. Part 1. Beads, Boredom, and the First Art. We'll start with the oldest known art object in human history. Take a really close look at these 75,000-year-old shells discovered in the Blombos Cave down in South Africa. You notice those deliberate identical holes in them? What's absolutely fascinating here is that these shells had zero practical survival value. None. You couldn't eat them, you couldn't use them to hunt a woolly mammoth, and they certainly weren't going to keep you warm on a freezing night. And yet, someone went far, far out of their way to meticulously alter them. Making these beads required an immense, almost unimaginably deep level of patience. The maker had to painstakingly drill through each individual shell using primitive stone tools and then carefully coat them in red ochre. Imagine the sheer focus required to do this without any modern metal tools whatsoever. It would have taken hours, maybe even days, of simply sitting quietly in a cave. This directly challenges the whole idea that necessity is the mother of invention. In this case, biological necessity didn't invent art. Boredom did. Someone had a free afternoon, a pile of tiny shells, and the sudden beautiful urge to create something purely symbolic. Part 2. Flutes from a vulture bone. The exact same pattern of deep creativity shows up with our next artifact, too. Discovered deep inside a cave in southern Germany, this 40,000-year-old flute was actually carved straight from the bone of a vulture. And if you look closely, it features 5 highly specific, deliberately placed finger holes. Picture this. Tens of thousands of years before the invention of agriculture, way before the first cities, someone is sitting in a dark, echoing cave, carving these exact holes for no other reason than to just hear a melody.
They literally invented music. And researchers believe this early music was profoundly important for evolution. It was wiring our ancient brains for complex rhythm and pattern recognition, laying the whole groundwork for human cognition long before we even had the capacity to form complex sentences.
Now, we usually think of prehistoric life as purely brutal and unforgiving, right? But let's compare the cold modern concept of survival of the fittest. This idea that the strong live while the weak just kind of disappear, against the beautiful, undeniable archaeological reality of what we might call compassionate survival, where the community actively protects the vulnerable. Part 3. Compassion in the Shanidar Cave. Deep in a cave system in Shanidar, Iraq, researchers uncovered a 46,000-year-old skeleton that entirely rewrites our understanding of prehistoric brutality. Just look at the extreme physical toll on this individual. He survived for years with a completely withered right arm. He was missing a hand entirely, and he was blind in one eye. In a harsh, incredibly dangerous prehistoric environment, he was completely unable to hunt, he couldn't gather heavy food, and he definitely couldn't defend himself from predators. By every cold, calculating rule of natural selection, this man should have been dead very early in his life. But he wasn't. He survived to an old age. And he survived not because he was a great hunter, but because someone fed him, someone physically protected him, and even chewed his food for him when he couldn't. His community kept him alive for years. I mean, think about the emotional punch of that. The oldest human instinct we have concrete physical evidence for isn't warfare, and it isn't selfishness, it's the conscious decision that a suffering person is still a person entirely worth caring for. Compassion isn't just some modern luxury, it is a foundational, hardwired human trait. Part 4. Ancient shaman burials. Now, this incredible empathy brings up a really fascinating follow-up question. If they cared so deeply for the physically broken, how did they handle individuals whose minds function differently? See, in the ancient world, hearing voices or seeing visions wasn't immediately viewed as a biological malfunction or something to be feared and locked away. Ancient cultures often used the framework of the shaman, a revered figure standing firmly at the boundary of the ordinary world. To them, these profound psychological differences weren't an illness, they were a doorway to the unseen. Delivering these individuals into a role of spiritual leadership gave profound social meaning to those who experienced reality differently. It integrated them directly into the core spiritual life of the society, rather than casting them out to the fringes. And we can see the deep reverence for these figures preserved perfectly in the archaeological record. Out in the arid deserts of western China, researchers found the 27,000-year-old coffin of a blue-eyed shaman. He was sent to the other side with incredible, painstaking care. He was buried alongside a beautifully crafted harp, intricately made horse bridles, and, get this, nearly 2 pounds of remarkably preserved cannabis. This was a medicinal and spiritual plant that humans had revered for millennia for its deeply connective, mind-altering properties. They meticulously packed his grave to ensure he had absolutely everything he needed to continue his important spiritual journey beyond this life. Part 5. The Echo in Us All. So, what does this all mean for us? How do all these magnificent ancient artifacts, the delicate shell beads, the bone flute, the protected skeleton of Shanidar, the revered shamans, connect to you right now? Well, ancient humans effectively defeated loneliness through 4 daily, unwavering pillars. First, presence. They lived alongside others daily, moving and breathing as one cohesive unit. Second, touch. Regular physical touch and mutual grooming provided a deep chemical sense of safety. Third, story. They shared engaging narratives around the flickering campfire every single night, aligning their emotions and fears. And finally, music. Synchronized music and rhythmic movement flooded their brains with bonding endorphins. These 4 pillars were the daily, automatic ancient solutions to isolation. We didn't lose the biological ability to connect to one another, we simply lost the quiet, communal environment that once made these 4 pillars a mandatory, inescapable part of everyday life. I want to leave you with this provocative thought as we wrap up this explainer together. For hundreds of thousands of years, silence and boredom were never problems that needed to be solved. They were the rich, fertile ground where art, music, deep compassion, and genuine human connection first grew. Today, every time you fill a quiet, empty moment with a glowing screen, are you inadvertently destroying the very boredom that originally built the human world? Take a moment to just sit in the